If you're trying to get a Node.js and Express API up and running that has support for TypeScript and ECMAScript modules, then this is the video for you. ECMAScript modules, or ESM, are growing in popularity, and a lot of tools like Arcjet are publishing ESM-only packages. This video is going to take us step-by-step through the process of getting everything installed that you need for that TypeScript support and making sure that Arcjet packages and other ESM-only packages will work in your application. Let's get right into it. Let's head into a terminal here, and we're going to make a directory called Node Express API, and we'll go into, and now we'll run npm init, and we're going to pass in a default of say yes to every question, and this is going to create a package JSON for us. If I now open code in the current directory, we'll be able to see what's been created in here. We can see our package.json has been created. Let's just make this a little larger, and we'll open our terminal over here. Now, the next thing we want to do is install our initial dependencies. So we're going to install Express, and we're also going to add some development dependencies, TypeScript, TS Node, which is going to allow us to execute our TypeScript through Node, which will transpile it in real time and allow us to run that in a development environment. We're also going to install the Express types so that as we're coding, we're not going to get those type errors in our IDE. So I'm going to get those installing over there. And the next thing we'll do is run npx tsc init. TSC is the TypeScript compiler, and we're going to initialize that in our application, which is going to create a tsconfig file over here in our root directory. If we open that up, we'll see the default come out. We're going to replace this entire document with some configuration of our own. If I paste this in and we make this a little larger so we can see what's going on, this configuration is going to tell our TypeScript compiler that we want to enable the latest ECMAScript features while still maintaining interoperability between ECMAScript modules and CommonJS. With that in place, we can now go and write some TypeScript code that'll start an Express server on port 3000 and respond to a single root request. Let's create a new file, source app.ts. First thing we're going to do is import Express from Express, and then we want to instantiate the app. We're going to put in here a port is 3000. We're going to create a single request here. Instead of responding with the plain text hello world, we're going to respond with a JSON response, also hello world. And finally, we're going to instantiate our app on localhost port 3000. We don't want to create a Docker file in the root of our project. So with that done, let's just reformat. That looks good, and we'll hit save. Now, we could probably start our web server at this point, but before we do that, what I want to do is add one more step, and that's to have a hot reload mechanism. Whenever I make changes to any of my TS files, I want the web server to restart automatically so I don't have to remember to stop and restart it. So we're going to use nodemon in order to monitor any changes to files, specifically TypeScript files in our source directory. And if nodemon detects any of those files changing, it's going to restart Node for us. So let's install nodemon. And the next thing we want to do is come over here and create a new file. We can call this nodemon.json. Now, the contents of this are going to be the configuration that we want for when nodemon executes. So we want nodemon to be watching the source directory. That's going to make sure that any files in that directory are monitored. We want to specifically monitor files that end in .ts. So it's going to be TypeScript files that we're editing in the source directory. We want to specifically ignore anything in the dist directory. So that's files that have been built and compiled and ready to go into production. That's outside of the source directory anyway, but we're just going to put that in there just as a safety guard. And finally, exec is going to define what nodemon does when it starts or when it reloads because it's detected a change in a TS file in the source directory. And what we're going to do here is we're going to run load. We're going to start with the source app.ts that we've just created. But in here, we're also going to say that we want to use from the TypeScript node compiler, which is basically going to be compiling in real time so we can run in our development environment. We want to enable ECMAScript module support. Finally, let's go into our package.json and define a script over here to allow us to start nodemon easily. We're going to create a new script called dev, and we're going to run nodemon. We don't actually need to provide the script because that's defined in nodemon itself. Now, Two last things we need to change is this line here, the main index.js. That actually defines an entry point for a package or a module. We're not creating a package or a module, so this is actually irrelevant to our project. But one thing we do want to do is define this project as type module. And what this is going to do is tell Node to treat all files as ES modules as opposed to common.js. So if I hit save on this, we come down and we run npm run dev. We'll see this now starts up on port 3000. And if we open localhost on port 3000, we'll see the message, hello world, has come back. So we've got our Node.js application with Express API up and running. We've got a request back. It's set up for ESM modules. We're now ready to go ahead and add some extra modules and packages based on ESM. One of those that we want to do in order to make sure that our APIs are secured is to add Arcjet. So let's add Arcjet. Let's stop our application down here, and we're going to install Arcjet node. And while that's happening in the background, we're also going to jump over to Arcjet, and we're going to create a new site for our application. I have a demo here already. If you're using Arcjet for the first time, just hit new site when you get here. I'm going to jump into my demo. I'm going to go to the SDK configuration tab. You'll end up here automatically for a new site. And my Arcjet key is here on the right. So I'm going to copy that, and we're going to put that into a .env local file. If I create a new file here, .env local, and I say Arcjet key is equal to the key that I just received, I'm also going to define an Arcjet environment to be equal to development. This just makes sure that in certain environments where node.env isn't set to development, Arcjet can still determine that it's running in a development environment, and we use that in order to make sure that Arcjet can actually run against an application running on localhost. Normally, that would be a flag in itself, but in development, obviously, that's something that's going to happen. So I'm going to save that and close this file. Now, normally, we would install a package like .env in order to pull the environment variables in. Node 20 and beyond actually allows you to pass this in at the command line level. So if we jump back into nodemon here, where we've got the loader defined, before we define the loader, or after you define the loader, you can define the environment file. So I'm going to say here that I want to pull in the environment variables from env local, and we're going to pass that in with a --env file flag to node. If you're not running node 20 or beyond, you can still use something like .env to pull these variables in for you. So if I save that and close that, we can now jump back to our app.ts file. So we've installed the Arcjet SDK, we've got the API key, we've put that into our environment variables file. We can now add Arcjet into our code here. So let's give ourselves a bit more space here. We're going to import Arcjet from Arcjet node. We're going to leave these here. Now what we're going to do is define our Arcjet object with all the rules that we want to enforce onto every one of our Express API endpoints. And in this case, I'm going to configure shield, bot detection, and rate limiting so that can apply to every single route in our application. So let's define a constant AJ, and this is going to be a instance of Arcjet. And as part of this, we need to find the key, which we're going to get from process.env.arcjet key. I'm just going to stick a little bang or an exclamation mark on the end there because that's the TypeScript way of saying I'm pretty sure that is going to be available to you when you need it. And we're also going to define some rules. First one I'm going to install is shield, and it requires a mode. So let's set the mode here to live. We also want to define a detect bot. So let's put that in here. We're also going to have a mode equal to live, and we're going to have a block to be automated. So what I want to do here is block all automated bots from accessing the application. We also want to put in some rate limiting. So we're going to use a fixed window here, and we want the fixed window to have a mode of live. We want there to be a maximum of, let's say, 1 request, and a window of, let's make it 1 minute. So we can have 1 request per minute, as long as it's not an automated bot, and Shield hasn't detected any kind of web attack. So that's Arcjet configured. Now what we want to do is apply this to every single endpoint. We could add our code directly into this route here, but that would only affect that one route. So let's use app.use in order to do some middleware detection of what's going on and decide at that point whether we want to block access before we even get to the route itself. So if we type in appuse is going to accept a function as a parameter, and the function is going to take the request, the response, and also a next handler, which allows the next middleware call to be made. Because Arcjet requires an await, we're going to make this an asynchronous function. So we'll make an async function which requires the request, the result, and next. First thing we want is to ask Arcjet for a decision. So let's define the decision to be equal to await arcjet.protect. And that's going to take the request as a parameter. Now we can say if the decision comes back as denied, we can do some further checks as to why. If it's going to be a rate limiting issue, we're going to do a rate limiting error response. Otherwise, in the case of Shield or in the case of bot detection, we're just going to say access is denied. That'll be a 403. So if the decision reason is because it was a rate limit, then we're going to come back with a result 429 rate limit exceeded. Otherwise, we're going to say results 403 denied. And in order to make sure that this application doesn't run multiple things, I'm just going to say I want to return this status, or I want to return this status, just reformatting. So if it's denied and it's a rate limit, we're going to say rate limit exceeded, and we're going to return that. Otherwise, we're going to say it's an access denied, and we're going to return that. Finally, if it's not denied, we're just going to call next. And we come back down here and we restart our server, and we jump back into our application. We will see here that if I hit refresh, we've still got our hello world. If I hit refresh a second time, we've got rate limit exceeded. And if we jump over into my requests over here, we can see, if I make this a bit bigger, we just saw a request to port 3000 here that was okay, and then another one that was rate limited, and Arcjet is now protecting our application. And that's it. You've just created a Node.js and Express API endpoint that supports TypeScript and ECMAScript modules and has been secured by Arcjet in terms of applying a shield, a bot detection, and rate limiting to every one of your endpoints in your Express API. Give it a try. Let us know how it goes for you. Either hit us up in the comments below or check out the description. We've got a link there to a Discord channel. We're there to provide help and support and to just chat. I'd love to know how it goes for you. And until next time, have fun.